It had seemed like any other day at my high school. Mrs. Smith's chemistry class was dragging on as usual, with half the students bored out of their minds. Tom sat near the back, only pretending to pay attention. As was often the case, his gaze kept drifting to the beautiful Mrs. Smith at the front of the class. For months now, Tom had been nursing a fierce crush on his teacher, Mrs. Smith. Though only 25 herself, Mrs. Smith was kind yet stern, the perfect combination as far as Tom was concerned. He found any excuse to stay after class just to spend a few extra minutes in her presence. Yet no matter how obvious his infatuation, she remained oblivious. The morning dragged on endlessly for Tom. Every time Mrs. Smith's eyes scanned the room, missing his longing stare, he felt a fresh pang of disappointment. By the time the lunch bell rang, frustration and resentment were bubbling dangerously close to the surface. As his classmates packed up eagerly to eat, Tom lingered behind under the pretense of needing help. "Mrs. Smith, may I have a word?" he asked, struggling to keep his tone even. She sighed warily and closed her notebook. "What is it, Tom?" As their eyes met, something inside him suddenly snapped. Months of bottled emotions erupted like a volcano. "Why can't you understand that I love you?" he shouted, face contorting into a mask of rage. Mrs. Smith leapt back in alarm, raising her hands placatingly. Tom calmed down. "These feelings aren't appropriate. Let's talk to the counselor." But her usual kindness only twisted the knife deeper. He let out an anguished howl, clawing desperately at his hair. Panicked, she fumbled for her phone with trembling fingers and hit the emergency panic button. Within seconds, the shrill tones of the lockdown alarm echoed through the halls. Students and staff scrambled into designated safe zones as Principal Wilson's voice boomed over the intercom to remain calm but vigilant. By now, Tom was past the point of no return. His eyes blazed with an unhinged fury as he tore open his backpack. Mrs. Smith screamed in horror as Tom produced the huge butcher's knife he had been secretly carrying all morning. With a wordless yell, he lunged at her across the desk. Displaying remarkable reflexes, she dodged aside just in time and sprinted for the classroom door. But Tom was too quick. Grabbing a fistful of her hair, he wrenched her backwards into a chokehold. "Please, Tom, let's talk about this rationally," she sobbed, tears streaming down her face. But rational thought had long since fled. 2 armed police officers charged through the doorway with weapons drawn. "Drop the knife now," they shouted in unified voices. Yet Tom only gripped Mrs. Smith tighter, dragging her towards the cops with a crazed glare. Faced with no other choice, they opened fire. Tom's body jerked violently as multiple rounds tore through his flesh. His death grip slackened and Mrs. Smith broke free, collapsing onto the floor in hysterics. Within moments, the classroom was flooded with emergency responders. An anguished wail arose from dozens of nearby classrooms as students bore helpless witness to the harrowing drama unfolding before them. In the days that followed, the shattered community struggled to comprehend how such a tragedy could have occurred. Tom had always been a shy yet intelligent student before snapping under the pressure of unrequited infatuation. His last act of violence served as a sobering reminder of the damage untreated mental health issues can inflict if left to fester unchecked. Now, she and the surviving witnesses would have to learn to live with the psychological scars of that fateful day for the rest of their lives. It was a dark and gloomy Tuesday when our chemistry class was disrupted by the shrill cry of the lockdown alarm. Confusion swept through the classroom as Miss Parker directed us to shelter procedures with flustered urgency. As we sat in the dim glow of our phones, an peculiar feeling of dread crept over me. Then, one by one, our devices quietly pinged with mysterious messages from an unknown number. "Danger approaches. Seek the truth to survive," the first cryptic text warned. Panicked rumors ricocheted between my classmates. What ominous threat were we being cautioned of? Was this an elaborate prank or a genuine warning? More troubling texts soon arrived, ominously mentioning a grisly murder long left unsolved within these very walls. A memory nagged at me of vague newspaper clippings about an unresolved homicide case from years past. Yet no details surfaced no matter how deeply I racked my brain. Trapped together in tense isolation, escalating anxiety permeated the cramped lab by the second. Desperate for answers, a few of us scoured online archives for any clue relating to the oblique references. Gradually, alarming connections emerged between the texts and sparse records of the cold case file. Recognition lit in Andrew, a keen student beside me, noticing subtle patterns within the successive messages, seemingly signposting various locations around the school containing additional clues, if only decipherable. A reckless plan formed in my mind, exchanging phones with Andrew on the contingency he immediately contact emergency services should I not return safe and sound. I stealthily slipped out into the dark corridors alone, pursuing whatever trail I could discern from the cipher within the ominous text, still streaming to the pilfered cell phone. Creeping through the murky halls dimly illuminated by intermittent security lights, my pulse raced as I drew nearer to dusty storage rooms holding fragmented remnants from times past, scribbled notes within abandoned texts, and tattered flyers scattered across the decades slowly coalesced a disturbing mosaic when fitted together with care. A horrific revelation emerged of vengeful obsession, gruesome acts committed beyond the grave left unavenged for decades within these very walls. But then, a distinct dragging sound caused me to freeze in silent dread. Frozen in place, I watched from a balcony above as a gaunt hooded figure drifted below with chilling intention, towing something crimson-smeared in its sinister wake. When illuminated briefly under a flickering light, a crazed visage hauntingly familiar contorted back with sinister delight. I resisted a shriek of horror, narrowly escaping detection as the abomination disappeared around a distant turn. Scrambling back towards safety while maintaining stealth, trembling fingertips flew to alert awaiting authorities that our imminent danger was only minutes from total catastrophe. Within moments, SWAT vehicles swarmed the area, securing perimeters as cautious sweeps inside commenced. In a remote sector below, a deranged man was subdued mid-act, reciting crazed murmurs of vengeance under stained breath in a demented trance. It seemed a merciless evil, long thought vanquished, had in fact been awakened from its slumber by an obsession for reprisal through murder. In the unsettling aftermath, it was ascertained the detained individual was a former student unable to let go of perceived wrongdoings from years past, fixated upon enactment of vindictive justice through depraved acts. Gradually, our school will recover from this harrowing ordeal, but that lingering feeling of otherworldly menace still haunts restless dreams, and I fear the mysteries lingering within these walls have yet to fully reveal themselves. Please take care, my friend, and be vigilant. Who knows what other evils may lurk just beyond sight, awakening from the shadows at any second. It was the last class period before the weekend at a local public high school. As the dismissal bell rang, hundreds of hungry students began flooding into the expansive cafeteria, eagerly chatting and catching up with friends between bites of pizza, burgers, fries, and other lunch favorites. The mouth-watering scents filled the air and blended with the shouts, laughter, and conversations echoing off the high ceilings. Among the crowd was 15-year-old Ryan, a popular sophomore known for boundary-pushing pranks and mischievous antics that usually elicited laughs from classmates. Scanning the packed lunchroom, Ryan's mind began working overtime to think of their next big stunt. That's when their eyes fell upon the large stockpile of plastic cafeteria trays stacked precariously high by the serving line. A daring idea started forming that was sure to cause chaos. When the lunch rush died down a bit, Ryan discreetly slipped away to the drama department storage closet. After rummaging past old props and costumes from past school plays, their hands closed around an old but eerily realistic Ghostface mask tucked away in the shadows. A wicked grin spread across Ryan's face behind the grotesque white mask. Armed with their new disguise, Ryan pilfered a sharp bread knife that had been carelessly left out by the unassuming lunch staff. With mask in place and weapon in hand, they casually re-entered the crowded cafeteria, blending seamlessly back among unsuspecting peers. Lurking in the periphery, Ryan timed their entrance perfectly. At the apex of lunchtime noise and activity, Ryan suddenly leaped out from the crowd with a dramatic flourish, brandishing the large blade above their head. The effect was instantaneous and deafening. A collective scream arose so loud that several speakers promptly blew out. Absolute Pandemonium ensued as nearly 500 students sprang from their seats in blind hysteria. Terrified teens desperately shoved and pushed each other, toppling furniture and crashing into fellow students in their mad dash towards any available exit. Those closest to the ghostly figure found themselves frozen in place, throat locked in a vice grip of unearthly fear. Within moments, the frenzied rush evolved into a full-scale riot. The blaring of alarms signaled the school was going immediately into lockdown. Armed police swarmed the premises at breakneck speeds in full riot gear, mobilizing with firearms at the ready to engage any threats. Methodically, classrooms were swept and cleared room by room. Meanwhile, hundreds of screaming, crying students were on the verge of a collective breakdown inside the cafeteria. Outnumbered staff battled frantically to regain control of the unruly mob, while parents began calling out of panic and concern for their children's safety, adding fuel to the chaos. Police soon tracked the source of the initial disturbance to a side exit, where Ryan stood in a state of pure remorse at how severely their joke had escalated and backfired. In those fraught moments, a hair trigger could have brought unspeakable tragedy. With trembling hands, Ryan removed the mask to reveal their now deathly pale face, suddenly cognizant of the precipice they stood upon, cuffed and led outside into the orange glow of emergency vehicles. Ryan was met with the panic-stricken crowd of students, parents and faculty. It sunk in that through this close call, precious lives were nearly lost, either through violence or the crush of a mob in hysterics. From that day forward, funny pranks would have much graver consequences if taken too far. Ryan learned the hardest of life lessons about the fragility of innocence and clarity of responsibility in ways they would never forget.